Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today we have your very first of 2021 Minnesota Viking victory. There it is, folks. We finally got there. It took 3 weeks, but ultimately, your Minnesota Vikings have a 30-17 victory over the Seattle Seahawks to move to a 1-2 record for the 2021 season. And inspires some optimism along the way. I mean, this was a fantastic performance by a lot of different stretches here, and we'll, go over a handful of them here. Of course, the quarterback, Kirk Cousins, was amazing. We'll dive deep into his performance and kind of, the level of play that we're seeing from him overall this season, and kind of peaked this past weekend here in Minnesota against Seattle. The defense was nice as well. We'll talk about that. And then we'll hand out some game balls, which is something we haven't been able to do the previous 2 weeks because, of course, the Vikings lost. But now that they're on the winning side of the ball, we're gonna pick a couple guys who really stood out for us here. So that is the overall game plan today. Should be a relatively quick one, but we'll see what happens. So, all right, let's jump into this, starting with the man of the hour, Kirk Cousins. First and foremost, I mean, this guy gets a lot of heat from just about everyone. This show included, myself definitely included. So it's important that, if we're going to be an objective show, that we're going to point out when this guy is flaming hot as well. And this was about as good as I've ever seen Kirk Cousins play, not just in Minnesota, but in his entire football career. Front to back, this is one of the most complete performances you're going to get out of the guy, just in terms of his vision, awareness in the pocket, moving to different levels of the formation. I mean, he was beating down Seattle's defense basically consistently throughout the first half, and then he was solid again in the second half to get the Vikings enough points to get this victory. Really, really strong performance from Kirk Cousins here in a game that you had to win.
Yeah, this was to me a must-win kind of for the season. I think if you go 0-3, things start to kind of unravel here, and a lot of different questions are asked. Despite what I think we all agree, the Vikings were pretty competitive those first 2 weeks. Obviously, the point differential was a total of 4 points in 2 losses. And so, you knew they were close and they were kind of bound to have one go their way. And I think that was really my reason for picking the Vikings against the Seahawks was, they're playing well enough to win games. It's just not happening. And so that was, we saw Kirk Cousins, the way he's played basically since halftime of the Bengals game. He kind of continued that play. Really efficient throwing down the field. I did want to bring up a stat here that I had noted yesterday from, I believe it was Pro Football Focus. Yeah. So he has the top passer rating on throws 10 or more yards downfield this year at 152.4 for pass rating, which is damn near perfect. So he's efficient with the ball, and I think it also shows how well Thielen, Jefferson, KJ Osborne are doing, getting separation down the field, and the way that the Vikings are able to get vertical there. So offense isn't having any issues now. I know that was a concern coming out of preseason a little bit there, and in that first kind of half against Cincinnati was, can this offense gel like it did towards the end of 2020? And it looks like they're on track, and Kirk is a big reason for it. And so obviously a lot of football left, but you got to give it to 8. He's been awesome so far in 3 games.
Absolutely. Especially and this is going to become probably a more prominent talking point as we get deeper into the season here, but there are 17 weeks of football, right? That second loss on the year coming in week 2 doesn't necessarily hurt as much as it would have in previous years. I think it sucks that you lose to Arizona, because Arizona is probably going to be in that wild card hunt with the Vikings at the end of the year. But the AFC loss to the Bengals, I mean, we could overlook that one in a month now, if things kind of go the way we expect them to, in the next couple weeks here, and especially with Cincinnati too. I mean, they look pretty good. So not a terrible 1-2, especially considering that, of course, you're now 1-0 at home, which you're supposed to win.
I mean, there's the Vikings 1-2 and there's the Bears 1-2. Those are very, very different things right now. So
that's a good point. I mean, what is it? Bill Parcells that says that you are what your record says you are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Vikings are 1-2. Like they're not, I'm not leaning into this being a division champion, NFC champion level team just yet. But I will say that they are a competitive 1-2. I expect them to win more than 8 games this season based off the performance against at least 2 good teams, maybe 3, to start the year here. And really my biggest thing is, you've got Kirk Cousins playing consistent football for now 6 straight quarters. If you want to stretch that further, you probably could a little bit. I'm okay with it. His overall performance against Cincinnati was not bad by any means. So consistent football for basically 3 games, great football for 6 quarters for sure. And the rest of this team is kind of progressing alongside that, right? You've got Cousins giving you the consistency that you need at the most important position in the NFL. And now you're starting to see other guys start to come along as well. We've seen the flashes from KJ Osborne, of course, week 2 being the most prominent of that. I alluded to the idea that Justin Jefferson might be experiencing a bit of a sophomore slump. I'm still a little concerned with the drops, but I'm definitely not going to put that phrasing next to his name just yet after the performance that he just had last week, despite another kind of concerning drop is what I would call it. And Adam Thielen does not look his age. Straight up, I don't think any of us expected him to be the number 1 again this year. And yet here we are 3 weeks in, and this is probably definitively your number 1 receiver, despite having Jefferson and a rising KJ Osborne on your team.
Right. And Adam Thielen continues to be one of the best, if not the best, red zone threat in the game. And he's just so savvy about creating space, even though the field is limited in that area,
right.
Which is it's cool to see a guy like that who, again, he's over 30 years old, but he's still smart enough and he knows how to use leverage properly. The cool thing he does, and he does this with all those little kind of post routes into the end zone, or whether it's maybe breaking to the outside, is he's able to like lean into defensive backs in a way that is not pushing off, but he kind of uses his shoulder, leans into them, and then they kind of fall back off balance a little bit, and then he cuts inside, and it's open every single time. And when that's timed right, it's a little bit like that Rodgers to Devontae Adams back shoulder throw, where if that's timed right and Thielen executes that little lean in to the chest of the DB and breaks in, it's curtains for the defense. And you saw that on that touchdown in the game against Seattle. You saw it a couple of times against Arizona. So Adam Thielen continues to be one of the best red zone threats. He's the most trustworthy receiver that Kirk Cousins has certainly ever had, I think. That's why I really like the Vikings moving forward offensively, as they have 2 weapons now. I mean, you saw Jefferson too on his touchdown route with that little whip route about inside the 5. Like, you can run play action on that, roll out to the right, and that's going to be open if it's single coverage every single time. So, and I like the way Clint is creating those mismatches there, or at least those one-on-one opportunities where you scheme that up, you time it right, and Kirk to Thielen, Kirk to Jefferson, it's going to be open very often. And so this team is certainly heading the right way offensively. I have no doubt about it.
It's a great way to build a receiver core, right? Build it off of guys who are going to create separation, not necessarily are just talented, but also fundamentally elite, right? I think we can definitely say that about Thielen. I think Jefferson is as close as they come, for a second-year player in terms of his route running. And Osborne, I mean, I've liked what I've seen. I'm going back to that 3rd down route against Arizona, that quick slant that he ran over the middle to get open on like the Jarius Wright route, basically.
Yep.
I mean, that's a skill in the NFL to get open that quickly and, go beat one-on-one off the line. So you got 3 solid route runners, 2 probably elite caliber route runners.
Now you got Conklin showed up for week 3. He had 6 catches. He had a bunch of key 3rd down ones. Mm-hmm. I liked the one especially where there was it looked like a miscommunication of some sort on a play where basically the play kind of broke down and Kirk didn't have anything. And then he kind of scrambled around a little bit and Conklin found himself open and got, I think, almost the 1st down out of that play. So that's a cool thing to see, where Kirk maybe would have eaten that one or taken a sack there most of the time, but he kind of, extends the play a little bit, scrambles to his left. Conklin kind of goes with him, and you find that option. So there's a lot of positives there. And again, a number 3 option of some kind was sort of a huge question mark for me, a big concern for me with this team. All of last season, this past off season, and between Osborne and Conklin, I feel way better about that concern than I did. So, maybe Osborne didn't have the production per se this game against Seattle. I think he had 2 catches for like 25 yards, but Conklin stepped up as a big target, a big safety valve for Kirk. And I think between those 2, you have some really good 3rd options that were kind of unforeseen coming into the season.
Absolutely. Couple sugarcoating points here on Adam Thielen specifically. Obviously, we're sugarcoating, an Oreo right now because this is already a treat offensively. But Adam Thielen is a young 31 years old, right? Something interesting to think about. Of course, he didn't play wide receiver until he was 26. So, the first 2 years of his career when he was 24 and 25, a total of 20 receptions. So, I mean, the body wear and tear, probably lower for him than your average 31-year-old receiver. So something to consider as he continues to extend what has already been, a pretty prolific tenure with the Vikings. Also, I wanted to make a note of when you say a red zone option, or when anyone says a red zone option, we always think kind of inside the 5-yard line, right? Like you think about the fade routes or the quick crosser or whatever kind of crazy scheme these guys have came up with to get the ball inside 5 yards. The red zone's 20 yards, folks. And Adam Thielen does some of his best work in that 15 to 20 range. As you saw in his touchdown this week, I mean, he took a heavy hit over the middle on that touchdown, but he held on. So he's got kind of that Anquan Bolden trait where he can catch in traffic, which is huge in the red zone when it's 5 to 20 yards as opposed to 0 to 5 yards. So another thing to keep in mind when you're evaluating this red zone offense, I mean, they're scoring from 15 to 20 yards out too. It's not just having to figure out some sort of option for when you're 5 yards deep and you're looking for that big body guy. They do well inside the 20 and have been doing well for the most part this year. One kind of low note, which I know you wanted to talk about as well, and this kind of bleeds right into the conversation that I was having. We might as well touch on it now. The call that Mike Zimmer made towards the end of the football game to push the score to 30 to 17, right? Greg Joseph hits his third field goal. By the way, kudos to Greg Joseph. Huge for him to go 3 for 3 off of, the most heartbreaking thing.
Right.
His life, by the way, his occupation. So good for him. But the decision to kick there specifically,
I hate that
20-yard field goal.
I hate it so much. Like
you had, what was it, a 4th and 3 situation?
It was 4th and 1 from like the 1.5 yard. I mean, It was like 1.5 yard line. It was inside the 2, not quite at the 1. So the Vikings are up 27-17. I have to look up exactly how much time was left, but I believe it was in the 4-minute range, roughly in there, something like that. But it was, you can maybe find the exact time, but basically the Vikings were up by 10. I mean, really the game's over anyway. I mean, there's not a lot of time left as it is. And I mean, all right, I've got the
4
actual
minutes and 31 seconds left.
Yeah. So I've got the, so I don't know if you guys follow, Ben Baldwin. He works for The Athletic. He covers Seattle Seahawks. He's pretty deep into like the analytics side of things. He's got the 4th down decision bot on Twitter, which is what I went to for this. So essentially going into this decision, the Vikings had a 95+% chance to win this game anyway. And so his 4th down decision bot basically analyzes straight by analytics win percentage, what the decision should be on any 4th down decision in the NFL. And it spits out like what the recommendation should be for each team in that scenario. The strong recommendation for this one was to go for it. Although obviously this decision was not super consequential because it was a 10-point game with 4 minutes left. A field goal attempt in general gives the Vikings a 96% chance to win. A go for it decision gives them a 98% chance to win. So, I mean, it's not obviously a small difference there, but the thing I want to point at is if they get this, they go for it and get a touchdown, 100% chance. If the field goal attempt goes in, it's still 96% chance.
Right. So
your decision to kick a field goal there and you make it, it doesn't even impact your chances of winning.
Right.
I mean, it does. It's probably a minuscule where it's like 96.1 to like 96.4, but it's a very minuscule improvement. You go for that and you get it, game's over.
If what happens if you don't get it?
You get 95%.
Exactly.
So
not that big of a deal.
You drop by 1%. So, and now this is a very kind of low consequence decision where this in particular didn't really impact the Vikings' chances that much because again, they already were in a very good position to win this game. But it concerns me and it annoys me because there could very well be a scenario down the road this season where the Vikings are in a more meaningful game, a division opponent, what have you. A similar decision is made where they just get conservative, kick the field goal instead of going for the touchdown to end the game, and it costs the Vikings. And I mean, so the thing I'm concerned about here, when you're up by 10, a touchdown makes it a 3-possession game, provided the extra point goes through, right? So a 10-point game becomes a 17-point game. That game's over at 34-17. Doesn't matter if there's even 7 minutes left. That game's over. I'm concerned now because I feel like this thought process is similar. If the Vikings are up by, let's say, 3 late in the game against the Packers, 2 minutes left, down in the red zone there, it's a 3-point game, and you can score a touchdown to go up 10 and ice the game. Or you can kick a field goal, be up by 6, and then give the ball back to Rodgers to have him go down and score a touchdown. Like, that's the decision that I'm concerned the Vikings will make, is to kick that field goal, be concerned, play scared, instead of going for the throw, going for that touchdown to just end the game. And so I think that process was bad. I think now in this Seattle game, if Harrison Smith is called for PI on that play when he probably should have been deep on that 4th and 12, where he probably got there a little early and they didn't call it because it was kind of bang, bang. Suddenly Seattle's at the 1-yard line. They probably score on one of the next couple of plays. And the Vikings ends up needing a first down or an onside kick. They get it. I mean, that may not be a question if you just trust your offense to get 1 yard on 4th down and it's a touchdown, game over. You're not worried about any of that. Seattle probably doesn't even take that shot. They're probably throwing in the towel themselves. So I don't know. I really hate that decision. And I was actually at the game and I was like, so all the people around me are cheering for the defense to hold Seattle because it's still a game that's in hand when it shouldn't be, but it was a game in hand. Crowd's going nuts for the defense. I'm sitting in my chair, basically pouting like a child because of that decision. Am I letting it affect me too much? Probably, but I could not believe that they did not go for that 4th down. The crowd booed it, rightfully so. I was booing it. I just hope that process doesn't come back to haunt the Vikings later on this year in a more meaningful game when, a touchdown is able to seal a big win. And instead they kick the field goal and they end up losing that game.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think that you said everything that really needs to be said on the subject, so I won't add much to it. My only kind of thought here is just that I'm surprised that Mike Zimmer doesn't like going for it in this specific 4th down situation, right? Because the bad side of this equation, of course, is giving the ball to the Seahawks on where? Their own 1-yard line.
Yeah. Or
with your
somewhere
defense,
inside the 5. You got to go 95 plus yards.
And you get to do whatever the hell you want with your best toys and try to get 2 points out of this and make a joke out of the Seahawks. Why doesn't he like that? That part baffles me with Mike Zimmer because I get the approach.
Well,
right?
So the one thing I'll add.
Stupid.
Right. Well, the one thing I'll add, the Vikings actually they made the right call last year at Seattle, the right mathematical win probability call to go for that 4th down when they were up by 5, I think, on Seattle. Late in the game, first down would have iced the game. Game's over. Instead, they went for it. Mattison ended up short. Seattle got the ball back and they scored that touchdown. But you kick that field goal, it's an 8-point game, right? And so, I mean, it's one of those where he made the right decision. It came back to bite him because it was technically the wrong result last year. Right. So I think he was a little bit hesitant this time around, but
that's why results are so dangerous, though, honestly, because it's called probability for a reason, and they're called odds for a reason.
And I think we need to I think the Vikings are getting, at least in this instance, too predicated on results when
their first impression sucks.
It should be about the process. Right. And the process was right last year with the wrong result. This year around, now this is a decision that wasn't super consequential, but I don't want this to be passed over as I made the right call kicking that field goal because we won the game. Wrong call. If things had been a split second different on that potential pass interference down the field, that could have been a major, major difference in the result of this game. I'm glad the Vikings got out of there with that, with the win that they did, because I don't like that process. And I hope the right call is made in a situation that comes up later this year.
Yep. And that's fair. I mean, it's the safe call for sure. You put yourself up 2 scores, but not 2 touchdowns, of course.
That's the thing. Like a 30-17 game is a 2-possession game. 27-17 game is a 2-possession game. 30-17 game is a 2-possession game. Like, it doesn't do that much for you. It really doesn't. So I don't know. I was very frustrated about that. It took me actually a while in the stadium to be like, okay, this is fine. The Vikings are going to win this game. It's okay. Like, I was mentally, I needed more time than I probably should have to get over that, but let's just hope the right call's made the next time.
Really the only downside to basically the entire game, though. I kind of thought I tried to use the same process that we used last week, where we were saying like, all right, if this field goal goes through, the conversation is much different, right? So I tried to flip this and say like, let's say the Seahawks did come back and win this game. What positive things would we still be talking about? What negatives were there? And really, that coaching decision was really the only thing that kind of came to mind for me as like an egregious error by this team and the way they played. Obviously, you'd like to get touchdowns in the second half more than field goals. I think we would have potentially talked about that had the Vikings came around and lost this game. But ultimately, here they get the victory. And they do it without Dalvin Cook, too. I think it's important that I'm sure a lot of people will be talking about Alexander Mattison this week. And there's certainly discussions to be had there with regard to how important he is to this team. Usage limits and kind of the dispersion that the Vikings should use moving forward. I've seen people use kind of the Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon model as kind of a springboard for an argument for why you should be using Dalvin Cook, Mattison at like 70-30 or 60-40. So there's discussions to be had there. I'd like a little bit bigger sample size to kind of finalize any decisions one way or the other, but it's definitive here that Mattison is an NFL quality running back, right? He is probably a starter on at least 5 or 6 teams. I came up with several of them. I mean, San Francisco, Tampa Bay, the New York Jets. I think you can make an argument for several other teams as well that he would actually be a bona fide starter, like definitively on those rosters. So NFL starter quality in your backfield here. He gives you 112 yards on the ground. He adds you the receiving element, 6 for 59. That's something that Adrian Peterson couldn't even do, folks. So, I mean, 170 total yards, solid blocker as well. You definitely got more than you bargained for when Dalvin Cook is out. You hope that you get replacement level. You're okay with slightly below replacement level. You got, I don't want to say all pro, but like fan voting caliber success from Alexander Mattison on Dalvin Cook's day off. So there's a discussion to be had there about Dalvin Cook and how you should spread out that usage.
I'm all for getting Mattison more touches. Primarily, the number one reason is just because it salvages Cook's health and kind of wear and tear more, which I think is what you alluded to Green Bay and the Jones Dillon kind of combo, or what they've done in the past with Jones and Jamal Williams. I like that a ton. Aaron Jones, it saves his health. It makes him kind of last longer, as they've also signed Jones to a recent kind of a contract extension. So same thing I think should be applied to Dalvin Cook. The Saints have done a pretty good job of that lately with, like last couple of years, they've been mixing Latavius Murray, Taysom Hill, in addition with Alvin Kamara. So I think, not putting Cook on the spot as the bell cow, I think there's a reason teams are going away from that. It's that you see these running backs, they have these careers that, they peak kind of early in their careers at 25, 26 years old. They get an injury here or there, and suddenly they just plateau tremendously. You can come up with a bunch of names and examples there. Todd Gurley is the huge one. Le'Veon Bell is another. Like, those are two guys that 3-4 years ago, they were the top running backs in football, right? And suddenly now Todd Gurley is unemployed. Le'Veon Bell is on a practice squad. So
this isn't new, by the way, either. Like, I'm like, for the older crowd, you guys remember what happened to Priest Holmes too, right? Like, that guy went from being literally all pro 3 consecutive
Larry
years
Johnson,
in a row.
same team. That guy had a ton of usage. Like, I think he had like a record setting year for like carries.
Oh yeah.
Very quickly became a nobody in the league. So it's not outrageous. And I know there's a few guys over the years that have kind of withstood that. Obviously, Adrian Peterson is kind of our example, where the guy has kind of withstood that element where he has the injury and kind of comes through and still is very productive. Emmitt Smith was the guy that played forever, set records. There's examples throughout history, but the vast majority of running backs that become really productive, it doesn't last for more than 5+ years. It's a pretty short-term deal. So trying to preserve that with Dalvin, you have a guy like Alexander Mattison who can produce like this. It is, I think, valuable, and I think you take advantage of it. So I'm not saying cut Dalvin's usage in half or anything, give him 10 to 15 touches a game. I think you just, you do what Green Bay's done and kind of substitute drives. You go maybe for every, 3 drives that Dalvin Cook plays, Madison's in there for 2 of them. Just things like that. It's not that hard, and I don't think you lose that much by making that adjustment in your game plan. So that's the only thing I would add. And then I think we should also probably give kudos to this offensive line for another really, really good game back-to-back. Arizona and Seattle, 2 really good games by this offensive line. Vikings are now 4th. in pass blocking efficiency per Pro Football Focus. How about that? Fourth.
Definitely a how about that moment for sure.
That's kind of surprising. Not something I thought we'd say about this Minnesota Vikings offensive line, but here we are. That's a pretty darn good unit out there. That's put on display. Ezra Cleveland's making some big strides. Garrett Bradbury, they're using him on screens a ton. That is a big plus of Garrett Bradbury, is getting out in space, using his athleticism and to get out in space and be a lead blocker on screens. Brian O'Neill is still elite. No pressures allowed this year from him. So tremendous work by the offensive line. Now the big test, obviously, this coming week is going to be Cleveland and that ferocious D line.
Absolutely. So Mattison, by the way, total of 32 touches yesterday, 8 targets, 6 receptions, so 34 potential touches for Alexander Mattison. If you want to say that as the quote average for your Minnesota Vikings in terms of what they want to do with their bell cow running back, if you could just give Dalvin Cook 22 of those touches and then Mattison like 12, I mean, and then you can also include the fact that Amir Abdullah had 5 carries, CJ Ham had 2. Give Alexander Mattison 14 carries and Dalvin Cook like 22. That, I mean, you do lose a step with Mattison, but you don't lose the vision, the patience, the running ability, and just the overall scheme talent from Dalvin Cook down to Alexander Mattison.
Right. I mean, I think, that's a bit of an outlier yesterday's game where the Vikings just dominated time possession and had so many. I mean, they first down after first down, chewing up clock, whatever. But I think the point stands that. So I think my comparison for Mattison, like, when you play Madden and, you use Dalvin Cook like 4 plays in a row and suddenly his like stamina thing, like on the play calling icon gets red. What he is there is what Alexander Mattison is at his like best self, which isn't a bad thing, but it's like Mattison is Dalvin Cook at like 90% speed, where still productive, still very usable, still going to get the job done. Might not have that breakaway speed or breakaway caliber home run hitting ability like Dalvin does, but he's going to hit the hole the right way. He's going to read that zone blocking scheme in a similar fashion and barrel forward for those yards when they're needed. So I again, all for it, mixing it up a little bit more, increase Madison's usage, and I think it'll be good for his career too. Maybe he'll get a chance somewhere eventually after his kind of rookie contract here to get a chance at being a more of a featured role somewhere else, if that's the case. So, which obviously if the Vikings want to keep him around, maybe this is maybe don't use him as much, but I think for the sake of Dalvin Cook, I think it'll be better.
Absolutely. And you just look at this is a paycheck day for Alexander Mattison. We don't want to gloss over that. Like on a personal level, like hell of a performance for him. He probably just put a couple $1 million in his pocket just by putting that game on film. His ability to diagnose a defense and get to that second level and make something happen was pretty impressive on a consistent basis. So, all right, we haven't talked about the defense. We're running a little bit low on time here, so I do want to get to them before we get out of here. We came into the show kind of with the I don't want to say expectation, but kind of the hope and belief that the Vikings were going to get this victory. A lot of that hinged on the defense's ability to quote contain Russell Wilson. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, we typically use that term regularly with mobile quarterbacks, especially because Mike Zimmer seems to have an issue there. It's very vague. We know that. We don't have an answer for it. Of course, if Mike Zimmer doesn't, we're definitely not going to have an answer for how to stop the great passing mobile quarterbacks that are in the NFL. But what Mike Zimmer did yesterday, particularly in the second half against Russell Wilson, was nothing short of contemporary excellence on the defensive side of the football in terms of scheming your defense to give you an advantage against a guy that was 5-0 against your team in previous years, also dominated you in previous years with the exception of the one postseason game played in the snow where no one played well. I mean, this guy has been lethal against the Vikings, and the Vikings dialed up enough on defense for 30 minutes yesterday to essentially shut the door on this dude and his offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the first 3 possessions of the game where Seattle came out and scored those 17 points. I believe that's what it was. And then they didn't score after that, it was cool. Obviously, it sucks that they got out to that hot start, and there was a moment there where Seattle was up 17-7. Kirk had just gotten sacked on 3rd down, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. But then that same play, there was the defensive holding on Seattle. That's where the game completely changed. Vikings scored, what's the math, 20 something unanswered, 23 unanswered, and won the game. So the thing I liked about it, and I'm not too in tune on like the schematics on this, but one thing I just noticed, Russell Wilson, when he was trying to escape the pocket or extend the play, it seemed like most of the time he had to go backwards to do so, which is what I I thought was really good work by Mike Zimmer and his defensive line. Now, sometimes he did get out and did, escape the pocket and was able to make a throw on the run, what have you. But it seemed like he had to go backwards, spin around backwards, etc., to make that happen first. And I think that's the main part here. He's not stepping up, finding lanes in front of him. It's rather curling around behind him or running backwards to make that happen, which I think that creates valuable time for your DBs to catch up to open receivers or close those gaps. So big time performance there. Obviously, Everson Griffin I thought he was awesome. That spin move is still lethal over the
Neil
years.
Hunter
It's been lethal. Spin move
too.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so
phenomenal.
I mean, that's a really good performance. They shut down DK after that first half. I think he had one catch in the second half.
He's getting frustrated too. I love to see that.
Yeah. So, I think 95% of that defensive performance, especially in the second half, was very positive, shutting down a lethal quarterback in Russell Wilson and his two really good receivers there in Lockett and DK Metcalf. So obviously Bashad Breeland is like, I guess, the big, F on the report card as of right now. I think he's actually the worst graded PFF cornerback right now. So I think that's where you see some Cam Dantzler, tweets potentially there, but we'll live with that. We'll live with that right now, given if you could shut out the defense, or shut out the Seattle offense an entire second half, we can live with that PFF grade for that specific player just for a little bit here.
Couple points that I want to make here before we get to our game balls. One thing, the thing that the kind of the stat that doesn't exist that Drew was just alluding to with forcing the quarterback to go backwards, that might be something to investigate. Like that's a good point. Like,
no, that's merely like my perception of the game, and I could be wrong.
No,
but it just felt like it.
Even if you're wrong, like the premise of it, like forcing the quarterback to go backwards as opposed to go laterally in the pocket or stepping up into the pocket. I mean, those are yards. You're adding yards to the equation. Like that's something that's math that hasn't, I'm sure PFF accounts for it somehow, right? I'm sure they do, but I haven't seen it. So that's something to consider here, pushing them back as opposed to allowing them to step up. Something to consider moving here in the forward when we kind of see another mobile quarterback in the future here. I guess Rodgers to a degree is included in that conversation, and he'll be up, of course, eventually. One stat that really stands out to me, and it's the most basic stat of all time, but it really matters here. Russell Wilson, 3 carries, 7 yards rushing. 7 with a long of 4. He had 3 scrambles, no designed runs, of course. The one that got away from the Vikings was 4 yards. The other ones were 1 and 2 yards. So when the Vikings allowed him to get outside the pocket, he didn't get too far. That's the difference in this football game. He didn't have the blowout run for 40 or 50 yards alongside the Chris Carson blowout run for 30 yards. The Vikings didn't allow that crazy scramble, that ridiculous downfield throw to Rondale Moore, whatever it is. The stupid play did not happen, and it's because Russell Wilson was more or less contained within those constraints of the tackle position. So something interesting to keep an eye on. I love to see it. I love to see that type of progression, especially from Mike Zimmer, who's so old. Like, you just kind of wonder, like, is he stuck in his ways? Well, then he opens up a can of worms where you're like, all right, he can do this now.
I think, despite the points scored last week against Arizona, I think, and the hot start by Seattle in this game, I think that's 2 really good defensive game plans in a row by Mike Zimmer against 2 really good quarterbacks. The stars are getting plays
too, man. Like the goal of a defensive schemist, right, is not necessarily always to adapt, like have your players adapt to your scheme. It's to adapt your scheme to your players. And I think Mike Zimmer came in 2014 with a plan, right? And he implemented it. He got some guys on board who could help teach him. You think of all of the different former Cincinnati guys that have came through here to help teach the Vikings the defensive scheme. But now you're 7 years later in 2021, your scheme is this defense now, and you are allowed to kind of have guys play within that scheme and then also adapt around them. So like the guys who are making plays right now, they're Eric Kendricks, they're Harrison Smith, they're Danielle Hunter. I mean, it's nice to see the sacks from Everson Griffin too, but your playmakers, your big money guys, those are who are making the plays for you right now. The guys you signed this off season too, Xavier Woods, Nick Vigil, the guys that you paid with the intention of getting them reps to give you more positive energy on your team within your scheme is happening. That's a good thing in and of itself. I know it's a small sample size, but it's a good thing. It means it generally is going to, suggest positive results in the future, especially if this team can continue to play as a group as they have so well over the last couple weeks, really. for the most part. I'm with you. For the most part, with the exception of the Rondale Moore play, the DK Metcalf play, and maybe the Chris Carson touchdown, pretty good defense as a whole, and you have to be happy with the results that you've gotten, especially when it ends up in a win over a team like Seattle, who, I mean, they didn't look great yesterday. This is a good football team. So that's a nice victory. All right, let's wrap this thing up with kind of final notes and game balls here. So your game ball, who I think Kirk Cousins is the obvious one.
Yeah.
Do you want to share? Do you want to go off on Kirk Cousins, or how do you want to?
So I'm going to actually go with the guy we haven't talked at all about yet, and that is offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak.
Okay.
And I say this because I give him the game ball because I like the way that he basically implemented the same game plan, or at least it appeared so, the same exact game plan that he would have used if Dalvin Cook was in the game. Didn't overthink it. Stuck to the plan. Mattison got all those touches that Dalvin probably would have. Also mixed in a little bit more play action in this game. Added a little bit more help with protection. That helped the offensive line. That helped create those one-on-one mismatches on the outside with Jefferson and Thielen. So what a game by Clint Kubiak. I think this was a game where he kind of had to have a really good one. You're at home. You've got some very key, I think, mismatches to create with that Seattle defense. Did a really good job of that. Schemed open Tyler Conklin quite a bit in that game as well. So again, I mean, that offensive performance was darn near flawless. And they took a ton of time off that clock, which is a perfect Mike Zimmer offensive performance. So I'm going to give Clint Kubiak some credit for this game. Did a lot of the things we were kind of criticizing him for not doing those first couple of weeks, and put together a really good plan and good enough for that win. So props to him. That's my game ball.
I think we've spent enough time talking about Kirk Cousins, but in theory, right, I'm going to give him my game ball, but just for the sake of adding additional content instead of regurgitating the same thing over and over, I'll add a different one. And for me, I'm going to say that it's Greg Joseph, and I alluded to this before. How it's quote nice that he's that he got these 3 field goals or whatever yesterday, but he's having a great season, folks, with the exception to the one missed kick. And I hate it just as much as you. I mean, you guys were here for the show, right? Like, you guys didn't miss me ragging on the Vikings for having these same problems, right? Like, I was right there with you. But like, this is the type of thing where it's like, you talk about the kicker position being mentally, like, it's very mental, right? Same type of thing as golf. If you miss a shot, all of a sudden you start missing like 6 in a row, right? For him to get back on the horse immediately and just get right back out there and do his job effectively, that's how you know you have a professional at the helm, right? This isn't a Blair Walsh situation where you kind of got, at least I kind of got the impression from Walsh that he was in his head towards the end of his Vikings tenure. I'm not getting that impression from Joseph. He's very level-headed. I think that was obviously disappointed. You could see it in his face during his press conference, but it seems like he's not letting it get the best of him. And so to me, that in itself is worth being like, all right, man, like, this is like, you did your job to the best of your ability in a very mentally strenuous situation. Keep in mind, he misses that first field goal yesterday against Seattle. All hell probably breaks loose to a degree on offense. Like, it stops that chain of kind of effect. And it also probably loses him his job, because I highly doubt Mike Zimmer gives him another opportunity to kick a field goal after missing his first one of the day. So to get back on the horse, hit that field goal, and then hit a couple easier ones down the way. I mean, this guy's hit 450 yarders. If you take back the one play against Arizona, which sucks, he's having a great year. So I feel really good about his performance. I think he deserves the satisfaction of being able to kind of soak this one in and be like, I was perfect in a game that we won. And really, I mean, 9 points. How many extra points was there involved in there too? 3 extra points, 12 points. He was essentially the difference in this football game. So
Also,
good for Greg Joseph.
Jason Myers missed his first field goal in like 37 tries for Seattle.
Hey,
how about
is this not ridiculous? Is this not ridiculous? We just talked about the luck factor, right?
I know.
We took heat for that too. And by the way, it just evened out, which is why we talk about probability, law of averages, ratios, etc. Because all statistics said Jason Myers was hitting that kick, right? I think all of us at home expected him to hit that kick. And the streak certainly says he's going to hit that kick. Pete Carroll thinks he's hitting that kick, and he missed the kick. So it's like, this is unheard of for the Vikings. And this is the luck factor we're talking about. That was luck turning in the correct direction, and we have statistics to prove it. It's not just like pulling luck out of thin air. Like, it's visible. You just saw luck happen, and it finally turned. And what do you know? The Vikings won.
Yeah. I mean, that kicker stat where the Vikings are like, kickers against the Vikings are like better than any other team. And it's not even close. So it's perfect timing. I think that we brought that up last show with and then suddenly Jason Myers misses his first kick, and I think it was 37 tries, or that was the 37th try in a row or something like that. Unreal.
Meanwhile, Matt Prater, of course, misses for 68, and you get the pick 6 from Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Some of these things are just hilarious. Like, it's just like we
also Justin Tucker missed a field goal in Detroit. People are not going to talk about that, but he missed one and then made obviously the 66-yarder. But there was a weird, like, exciting, like, buzz when Myers missed that kick. Because it wasn't like your normal, like, you go to a football game and the kicker misses. It's like, oh, hey, he missed. It was like a weirdly, like, it was quiet at first because it was like, what just happened? And then it was celebration after that. So I mean, that was kind of fun to be a part of. But yeah, Jason Myers, you hate to see it. You hate to see it for sure. Any final notes before we get out of here? I don't think so. Go USA. Team USA dominating the Ryder Cup. I told you guys that'd be a fun, and it was fun. It was also not fun though because it was like over basically on Saturday. Right. But Team USA, big dub. Europeans get kind of a taste of their own medicine for wearing those cheesehead Packers hats during the week. So they deserve that. Go USA. I'm looking forward to going back to Europe in a couple years.
I just wanted to point out, we covered a lot of ground on this show, but we did not touch on Jordan Berry's punt. So that's what I wanted to end on, because that was a phenomenal way to end that.
It was like his second punt of the game too, by the way. Like, didn't have to punt like at all during the game, but then the one he hits.
I am as big of a fan of special teams as you're going to find for someone who did not play special teams at the collegiate level. Like, I love watching snappers do well. I love watching kickers do well, but punting is really, like, that's my shit. I love a good punter. And that was singularly the best punt that I've seen in a very long time. And there have been some really good ones, but like, this required no help. This was like coffin corner out at the 3, like
they're attacking with everything they have to try and block it. He just has like the quick trigger on it. It's like the quick release in basketball where you just flick it up there.
Yep.
That's what it was with the punt, and it was money.
It could not have been more perfect. Like, it was literally like that was the definition of coffin corner. And I love to see that. I mean, how about the special teams as a whole? I know I just went off on, Greg Joseph, and you have a couple of moments there, whatever. But the special teams much
also
improved.
The CJ Ham block that went viral on one of the punt attempts. That was nice too. Love that.
Love to see anything positive from CJ Ham as well, because of what a pillar he is in this community. An amazing guy. So I think it's a great place to end. Jordan Perry ended the game with a punt, and we're ending the show with his punt attempt. So fantastic performance from the Vikings. It's nice to get one in the win column. It's nice to get a pretty convincing 2-score victory for your Minnesota Vikings as well. That will, definitely help us push into this Cleveland week a little bit easier. We'll be back to talk about the Browns on Thursday. They're coming off of some interesting performances. I know they're winning some games, but they haven't been lights out by any means. And I got to say, I know Drew and I were leaning a little bit more confident after Arizona, but after the performance against Seattle, I'm leaning a little bit more confident now than I was last week. And I'm not putting it away.
Optimism is a dangerous thing. It is dangerous.
Man. It's a drug, man. It's a drug. And I'm not saying they can't beat Cleveland. I'm going to have 72 hours to think on that before 48 hours to think on that before we do our preview show. But I'm excited, man. I'm excited about the potential. I think it's going to be a great game for the Vikings on Sunday. I love playing Cleveland too, especially because it's Stefanski. So we'll get all that out there later on this week.
Mike Prefer too.
Mike Prefer too. That's a good point. We'll talk more about all of that later on this week. Figure out kind of where the Vikings are at going into the weekend. Until then, make sure you're checking out the rest of the Climbing the Pocket Network. You can find all of those guys on Daily Norseman. You can find them on the climbingthepocketnetwork.com. And of course, you can find us on Twitter. Those guys are putting up daily shows, podcasts, live shows, etc., on a regular basis. Producer Dave does a great job giving everyone an opportunity on our team to put out some new content. So make sure you're checking that out. For us specifically, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcasts. You can leave us a comment on Daily Norseman. I always go through those. I find them extremely entertaining, even if you guys don't like the show. So make sure you drop us a line. We enjoy that. And finally, if you prefer to watch the show, we are on YouTube as well. You can find us there, and you can drop us a comment there as well. So until we speak again, enjoy this victory. It was definitely a fun one. It was nice to kind of get that sigh of the relief, but back to business later on this week. And so until then, folks, enjoy this one, and we'll catch you later on this week.